So I was scrolling through my feed the other day and I came across this clip. It was of a pretty well-known political commentator.
Okay.
And he wasn't, citing a white paper or breaking down some new piece of legislation. Not at all. Instead, he was leaning right into the camera. His face was all flushed. His eyes were wide with this look of just pure, concentrated disgust.
Wow.
He was talking about a really mundane policy shift, something most people wouldn't even notice. But the way he described it, he was using words like betrayal, filth, and parasite. It made it feel like he was witnessing the end of civilization in real time.
He was selling an apocalypse.
Completely. And what was fascinating wasn't just his intensity, but the comment section below. I mean, thousands of people, and they weren't debating the facts. Not one bit. They were all just vibrating on the exact same frequency.
Oh, there it is.
You had one user write, "I felt this in my soul." Another one said, "He's the only one who says how it actually feels to live here." There was just no interest in the fox-like nuance of a public intellectual or, the hedgehog focus of a business thought leader. This was something else entirely.
It's a different animal.
It is. And that moment of raw emotional synchronicity is the hallmark of this new and really powerful player in the marketplace of ideas, the vibefluencer. Unlike the traditional intellectual who tries to persuade you with an argument or thought leader who tries to sell you a big idea, the vibefluencer operates through pure effect.
Right.
They don't just give you information, they give you a mood. They wrap these complex political and social issues in layers of indignation, contempt, or outrage, matching their internal vibrational frequency to the growing anxieties of an audience that is, frankly, drowning.
Drowning is the perfect word for it.
In this age of just total cognitive overload, where the written word feels too slow and context has been shattered into a million digital fragments, the vibefluencer has discovered that you don't need to be right to be influential, you just need to resonate. But as the shift from rational discourse to vibe-based conviction accelerates, we have to ask, what happens to the truth when we stop looking for logic and start looking for a feeling?
That's a powerful way to frame it, and it really sets the stage perfectly for this deep dive. When we talk about influence, who holds sway in the modern public square? We often fall back on those old categories, the ones from Isaiah Berlin's famous essay.
Right, the fox and the hedgehog. It's a classic framework.
It is. So you have the fox, who is the traditional public intellectual. This is someone defined by their wide-ranging knowledge. They know many, many things. They engage in intellectual critique. They can debate experts across a dozen different fields.
Their whole value proposition is nuance, complexity, seeing the big picture from all sides.
Exactly. Then you have the hedgehog. This is the thought leader. They know one big thing. They have a single monolithic idea that they evangelize. They often manufacture and, monetize that one big idea to become a guru in a specific niche.
And the vibefluencer is this third force, something completely different. They aren't interested in the fox's broad critique because, frankly, that requires way too much context for a TikTok feed.
Too slow.
And they're not interested in the hedgehog's single theory, which can feel a little too prescriptive, a little too much like homework. The vibefluencer, they operate through a totally different dynamic. It's pure emotional connection.
And our mission today is really to define this third force. We're going to do that by looking meticulously at the evidence of how they get that influence in both politics and in commerce. And the shift isn't random. It's fundamentally driven by that cognitive overload crisis you mentioned.
We are literally drowning in data.
We are. The sheer volume of information means that people just don't have the patience or, frankly, the cognitive tools for a detailed, rational analysis of every complex issue thrown at them.
I mean, think about it. Proper rational analysis, like reading a 50-page policy brief, that takes focus. It takes dedicated time. But when information is flying at you in these fragmented 15-second bursts across a dozen different apps, that slow, deliberate process is just unsustainable. It can't compete.
It creates a vacuum, a huge one. And when you don't have the ability or the motivation for detailed analysis, your brain defaults to shortcuts. Effective persuasion, the use of raw, immediate emotion, becomes the most effective shortcut for influence.
It completely bypasses the rational, critical thinking parts of your brain and just goes straight for the gut.
Exactly. If an idea feels right, it must be true.
So let's unpack that psychological blueprint. I think understanding the mechanics of effective persuasion is absolutely key to understanding why the vibe just works so much better than the white paper today.
Okay, let's start with the foundation. The vibefluencer is, at their core, a personality-driven intellectual. But their specialty is combining politically charged ideas with really explosive feelings.
So their main instrument isn't logic, it's affect.
Precisely. Carefully curated indignation, contempt, disgust, outrage. The content isn't judged on whether it's true, but on its power to stir up a very specific emotional state in the audience.
And their business model, crucially, is built around disruption, right? Not necessarily sustained, nuanced loyalty. Traditional media, they're often looking for that long-term, predictable engagement.
Right, a subscriber base.
Yeah. The vibefluencer, though, thrives on the virality that's created by shock and emotional extremity. They're basically monetizing the attention that the cognitive overload crisis itself generates.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah.
Because if that traditional rational discourse, the slow written word method, is just poorly suited for the modern environment, then the content that succeeds has to be simplified and instantly resonant.
People are looking for emotional salience. It's a quick hit that validates the anxieties they already have, rather than a comprehensive understanding that might challenge them.
And when context is shattered into a million digital fragments, emotion is the only glue that can hold it all together.
This mechanism brings us to a concept I find fascinating: the narrative Ouroboros. It's a term that just perfectly describes how ideas gain influence now.
The Ouroboros, yeah. It's that ancient symbol of a serpent eating its own tail. It symbolizes these self-referential cycles.
Yeah.
In digital discourse, this means that mimetic spread, the way ideas or cultural patterns replicate, is reflexive.
It doesn't rely on logical or external validation at all.
Not at all. It operates through these self-reinforcing semantic networks that are based on shared emotional themes. Simple storylines conveyed through narrative arcs and powerful emotional resonance, they just become the dominant currency.
And what's really wild here is how these different semantic networks start to collide and merge. They create these narrative hybrids that are maximally sticky because they bundle together multiple high-resonance emotional triggers.
Oh, absolutely. Think about certain high-resonance God memes, and we're talking here about concepts that carry immense emotional weight. They have a huge pre-existing blast radius in the popular consciousness. Things like the deep state, or narratives around Israel, or ideas related to pedophilia, or the shadowy workings of the intelligence community.
Each one is a powder keg on its own.
A huge one. And when the blast radii of these distinct, highly charged ideas intersect, that's when you get the most powerful, self-referential narrative hybrids. We saw this play out most clearly with something like QAnon.
QAnon was the ultimate example of the narrative Ouroboros in action. It was a masterclass in it.
It was. It fused elements of Trump draining the swamp with these lurid narratives about cabals of pedophilic global elites and dark rituals. It succeeded not because it was logically sound, it was anything but because it satisfied this massive demand for a unified, dramatic, explanatory structure.
Yeah.
And it was packaged with extremely high entertainment value and maximum emotional urgency.
Or you can see it with the perpetual speculation around figures like Jeffrey Epstein. The rumors about his blackmail network, they don't just stay in the financial or criminal sphere.
No, they immediately merge with the Israel and the intelligence community memes. Vibefluencers seize on this. They'll sometimes draw on speculation about his Jewish identity or his alleged ties to Israeli intelligence to fuse all these existing anxieties into a single, comprehensive enemy narrative.
It's all self-referential. It's just feeding the audience's emotional demand for a single dramatic explanation for why society feels chaotic.
Take, for example, claims made by vibefluencers like Candace Owens. She started linking her transgender conspiracy claims about Brigitte Macron to a supposed French-Israeli conspiracy involving Mossad hitmen targeting political opponents.
That's not journalism, that's pure narrative fusion.
Exactly. It takes 3 or 4 intensely charged semantic components and just welds them together for maximum emotional resonance and viral spread. The only unifying principle is the feeling of outrage it's designed to generate.
That helps us grasp the conceptual power. But let's bring this down to the ground. How does this play out in actual political campaigns? We should transition this into a real-world case study from Southeast Asia.
Yes, there's a study that focused on Malaysia's 15th general election, or GE15. It gives us a fantastic look at the micro-influencers. So these are accounts with about 10,000 to 100,000 followers. They were the most active and often the most effective in political outreach.
And they were using a whole suite of psychological levers with, it seems, startling precision.
They were. And the first, and you could argue the most important one, is the cultivation of parasocial interaction, PSI.
This is the one-sided, intimate relationship that a follower develops with a media figure, right? Even though they've never met.
That's it. The influencer simulates a friendship dynamic. They use casual conversational language, tons of emojis, they address their audience directly, and they often share highly personal or behind-the-scenes content.
So as the follower, you don't perceive the influencer as some distant authority figure like a politician or a traditional journalist. You see them as an intimate, trustworthy friend.
And that perception of intimacy is the key vulnerability. It dramatically lowers the audience's natural, rational resistance to political messaging. You end up treating the influencer's complex, often very partisan political opinions as if they were coming from a close personal friend.
And you internalize them without rigorously counter-arguing.
Precisely. It creates this unparalleled level of persuasive power because it completely circumvents your critical filtering process.
And beyond that, we also see the power of narrative persuasion being used to make these abstract political issues feel personally meaningful.
Oh yeah. Storytelling, especially personal anecdotes, fosters immediate empathy and emotional engagement. It reduces that impulse to counter-argue. We saw a really compelling example during that Malaysian election.
What was that?
An influencer shared a highly emotional personal story about taking their elderly mother to vote for the very first time. The post framed political participation, which is usually this abstract civic duty, as a concrete lived experience. It was centered on fundamental family values, on intergenerational identity.
Wow, that is a powerful emotional lever. You're transforming the act of voting from some bureaucratic chore into an act of family solidarity. It becomes a cultural value.
And that post received immense emotional engagement. The shares, the comments, they were all centered on support for family, not support for the political platform itself.
It's brilliant.
Absolutely. And if sincerity isn't the right vibe, humor works just as well. Another highly shared example was a viral TikTok sketch. It was titled, 5 Alasan Kenapa Aku Tak Pergi Undi, which roughly translates to 5 reasons why I didn't go vote and why they're all nonsense.
What'd it do?
It used these funny, emotionally charged retorts to refute the typical excuses people have for political disengagement. Stuff like, my single vote won't matter.
So it reframed apathy not with data, but with a humorous, relatable, maybe even slightly shaming emotional urgency. The narrative transportation is complete, you're just drawn into the story, and the policy debate is completely bypassed.
That's the critical component. And on top of that, influencers actively use social proof and normative influence. When an influencer advocates for a specific political behavior, let's say registering to vote, and that post is immediately reinforced by visible, high engagement metrics like thousands of likes and positive comments.
It establishes that behavior as a social norm within that specific community.
It creates a feedback loop. My friend, the influencer, did this. The whole digital community is validating it. Therefore, this is what people like me do.
Right.
And in the inherently ambiguous and emotionally charged atmosphere of an election, followers are much more likely to conform to that perceived norm.
Okay, let's talk about the final mechanism here, which is really about the platform itself. It's how users process information, heuristic processing. This comes from the elaboration likelihood model, right? ELM.
Yes, ELM. It posits that persuasion happens through 2 routes. The central route, which is deep processing, logic, arguments.
The hard work.
The hard work. And the peripheral route, which is superficial processing. It's all about cues and shortcuts. And because platforms like TikTok and Instagram are entertainment first, users are almost never motivated or able to process complex information centrally.
So they default to the peripheral route. They rely on these heuristics, cues like humor, or the influencer's attractiveness, or the simplicity of the content, its emotional charge, anything but deeply analyzing the policy itself.
And the vibefluencers are masters of this peripheral route. We see this with campaign content that avoids policy entirely. Instead of a detailed political explanation, they might use humor. Like creating a viral joke about how someone will wait an hour in line for bubble tea, but won't wait 15 minutes to vote.
That juxtaposition is funny, it's emotionally charged, and it's highly shareable. It gets the point across without any data.
Or they might use effective appeals that are entirely focused on safety and community reassurance. I remember seeing examples during post-COVID elections where influencers would post these very stylish reels. They were focused on the safety protocols at voting booths, using calming filters and soothing music.
So those safety-focused reels weren't conveying detailed information about the candidates.
No, they were conveying a vibe of civic security and communal responsibility. They successfully encouraged participation through emotional and stylistic appeal, completely bypassing the need for detailed political reasoning. The influencer doesn't need to win the debate. They just need to win the mood, They just need to resonate.
It really feels like a very fast-moving target. That combination of parasocial intimacy and the instant, uncritical acceptance of ideas through the peripheral route, that is a tremendously powerful blueprint for influence.
It confirms the core principle of the vibefluencer is simple. Emotional connectivity is the most efficient and effective form of communication in an environment of cognitive overload. So let's connect this to the bigger picture and see how this blueprint has redrawn the political battleground across Southeast Asia.
The material shows a really clear, dramatic shift, especially in Indonesia. The virtual sphere has pretty much replaced the traditional public sphere as the main platform for political conversation.
And this shift is absolutely defining for modern democracy. Historically, the public sphere, the Habermasian ideal, was a physical or formalized space. It was town halls, established newspapers, political salons.
A place for deliberative, rational debate among citizens.
Exactly. The virtual sphere, on the other hand, is fragmented, it's digital, and it's a relatively classless space created by technology. Conversations happen at lightning speed and are instantly globally distributed.
And with Indonesia having, a staggering 167 million social media users, it makes total sense that the presidential election campaign would move overwhelmingly online. A candidate's success or failure really hinged on their ability to manage the digital vibe.
We can see this in remarkable detail through the sentiment analysis from the 2024 Indonesian election campaign. It tracked the three candidate pairs: Anies Mohaimin, Prabowo Gibran, and Ganjar Mahfud.
Okay, let's start with Anies Mohaimin. From the looks of it, they seem to harness that genuine grassroots vibe most effectively.
They absolutely did. They consciously built their support through voluntary organic movements. They were effectively leveraging the power of online community fandom.
Which led to things like the Annie's Bubble, right? A fan community that was designed to feel like one of those intimate, voluntary online groups for K-pop stars.
That's it, exactly. They championed the hashtag change and achieved incredibly high positive engagement. They registered 64% positive sentiment in the first debate. It just confirms the enormous political leverage you get from an authentic, community-driven, voluntary vibe.
Then on the other side, you had the Prabowo-Gibran pair. They adopted a strategy focused more on quantity and association, leveraging the incumbent power of President Jokowi.
Their strategy was all about high volume. They got the highest overall number of mentions. For instance, in the crucial third debate, they racked up an astronomical 442,382 mentions. They used micro-influencers extensively and tied themselves very heavily to the continuity and sustainability ideas of the current Jokowi government.
But wait, if they had the highest volume of mentions, which is a metric usually seen as a digital victory, how did they do in terms of emotional resonance? Did all that volume translate into a positive vibe?
It did not. And this is where the digital sphere really reveals its complexity. Despite that massive mention count, the Prabowo-Gibran pair received exceptionally high negative sentiment. It spiked up to 60% negative responses in one debate.
So the high-volume strategy just amplified the critique.
It amplified the conversation, but it amplified the critique. The analysis points to two main areas. First, users perceived negative behavior and attitude from the candidates during the televised debates. Second, they were seen as unable or unwilling to give satisfactory answers on strategic issues, especially defense and the digital economy.
And what were the key words associated with them?
Critically, the high-frequency keywords included terms like constitutional court, which immediately suggested ethical concerns and political maneuvering to social media users. The vibe was perceived as defensive, evasive, and ethically compromised. And that feeling overrode the sheer volume of their mentions.
So what about the third pair, Ganjar Mahfud?
They took a more measured approach. They had fewer contributors, a lower total number of mentions across the debates, but they focused on responsive engagement. They were actively providing information, answering mentions, and maintaining a relatively neutral position.
So a quality over quantity approach.
Yes. And that strategy, prioritizing connection and clarity over raw volume, resulted in better positive sentiment than Prabowo-Gibran in several key debates. It confirms that in the virtual sphere, the quality of your emotional engagement often beats just making a lot of noise.
This analysis brings us right back to the core mechanism, the aestheticization of politics. It seems to be the ultimate tool of the vibefluencer, replacing complex policy with a curated mood.
There's a perfect anecdotal illustration of this dynamic. Picture a young Jakarta student named Adi. Adi is overwhelmed by the complexity of national politics, the policy documents, the competing stats, the endless news cycle. He completely bypasses traditional media.
So where does he get his political engagement from?
He connects deeply with a vibefluencer who specializes in curating a very specific mood of political dissent. This influencer uses cinematic reels, pairs them with melancholic lo-fi beats, and applies filters that evoke a shared sense of collective exhaustion with the current administration. The content is almost never an explicit policy critique.
So instead of a detailed breakdown of industrial pollution legislation, what does Adi see on his screen?
He sees a carefully produced 30-second clip. It's a close-up shot of a magnificent but polluted river at sunset. The visuals are stunning, but the mood is heavy. The caption is simple. It links the visual aesthetic of that polluted river directly to a stolen future.
That aestheticized emotion, the mix of the beautiful sunset with the reality of pollution and the weight of a stolen future, that acts as the carrier wave for the political idea. That single emotional payload connects deeper and faster than any policy paper ever could.
Precisely. The heavy lifting of democratic discourse, the research, the debate, the policy comparison, is just reduced to a series of fleeting, highly shareable, emotionally charged moods. The aesthetic is the argument. The vibe is the vote.
And since that's what the audience is gravitating toward, media has to adapt. This brings us to the rise of platform-native news, or what's increasingly known in Indonesia as homeless media.
Homeless media outlets are a fascinating hybrid. They are basically news organizations that are entirely reliant on platforms like Instagram or YouTube. They don't have a traditional home website. They borrow the distribution and content style of the influencer economy, but they maintain a veneer of journalistic intent.
And they're rapidly gaining credibility, especially with Gen Z.
The influence is hard to overstate. Homeless media accounts like Folkative, with 6 million followers, and USS Feed, with over 2 million, they rival or even surpass the follower counts of traditional, established national outlets like Compass and Detik.com on Instagram.
So it's not just a battle for followers, it's a battle for credibility. Gen Z, which is about a third of Indonesia's population, overwhelmingly prioritizes content that is visual, interactive, and easily digestible. They often rank homeless media as their preferred news source because it's native to their platform.
Right. They're delivering breaking news in bite-sized, vertically oriented content. They simplify complex issues with the visual language of the internet. Memes, graphics, short video clips. It all feels immediate, authentic, and far less distant than the formal, institutional voice of traditional media.
You have accounts like What Is Up Indonesia. They might explicitly say they are not a news site, but they're using humor and memes and viral audio to educate and encourage civic action on social and political issues.
And the feeling is authentic, often chaotic, and definitely relatable. It's the complete antithesis of a carefully vetted traditional editorial board.
The platform itself, especially TikTok, seems to dictate the political narrative entirely. Traditional campaign rhetoric, those rigid, policy-heavy speeches, it just fails because the platform's affordances prioritize speed, humor, and personal storytelling.
And the comparison across Southeast Asia shows how localized political cultures translate onto the platform. In Indonesia, political discourse is heavily driven by humor and satire. Meme-based user-generated content often gets staggering engagement rates, sometimes over 60%, far more than official, buttoned-up campaign content.
The audience is engaging through comedy, not conviction.
Exactly. Then in Malaysia, the focus shifts slightly toward cultivating authenticity. Politicians have learned they have to use personal storytelling, share behind-the-scenes content to reduce that perceived distance between them and younger voters. The goal is to make the politician feel like an accessible, relatable peer.
And it often has immediate success.
Look at Syed Sadiq. He gained 500,000 followers during one campaign cycle, largely by adopting these personal, authenticity-focused strategies. The message is basically, I might be a politician, but I share your struggles, and I use the same language you do.
This democratizing effect of the vibefluencer can foster genuine civic engagement, which is great, but we have to look at the dark side of this, which seems most skunkily illustrated in the Philippines.
There, TikTok became absolutely central to coordinated disinformation efforts. And this wasn't just accidental spread. We saw organized networks of influencers and bots generating millions of views for historical revisionism. The goal was to romanticize the Marcos era, completely blurring the line between organic advocacy and orchestrated, manipulated content.
And how did the aesthetic choices contribute to this revisionism? It wasn't just text they were pushing, was it?
No, it was entirely aestheticized. The content used these highly stylized visuals, dramatic musical scores, and sentimental editing techniques to replace historical critique with emotional, fictionalized storytelling.
So the audience wasn't presented with historical facts to debate.
No, they were presented with a mood of grandeur, stability, and nostalgia. This emotional recall effectively manufactured consent for a specific political narrative. It really shows that the vibefluencer is capable of distorting collective memory through emotionally charged fiction.
That blending of authenticity and manipulation really highlights the immense stakes here. The emotional resonance that drives voter turnout can just as easily drive the acceptance of historical untruths.
And if we connect this to the broader consumer world, we see that commercial entities have learned the exact same lesson. The consumer mindset operating in the political virtual sphere is identical to the one operating in the marketplace.
It makes perfect sense. The strategy of moving from rational facts to emotional resonance is central to commerce now. Brands are pivoting hard toward emotional loyalty, recognizing that traditional advertising appeals are just breaking down under the weight of information overload.
We see this dramatically in Southeast Asian consumer markets. In Thailand, for example, the research is conclusive. Brand loyalty is driven less by rational benefits like rates or points or discounts, and far more by emotional cues.
And this emotional connection, when it's fostered successfully, can multiply customer lifetime value, the CLTV, by, what was it?
An astonishing 306%.
Wow. That is a powerful incentive for brands to stop focusing just on product specs and start focusing on the vibe they generate.
Absolutely. And to capture this, brands have to deeply embed themselves into local communities and culture. In Thailand, this means acknowledging foundational cultural values. The three most significant are Namjai, which is a concept of generosity and good spirit.
Sanuk?
Right, Sanuk, the importance of fun and playfulness, and Sabai, which is all about ease, comfort, and convenience.
So a brand's customer service model, for example, is judged not just on its efficiency, but on whether it violates Sabai. A frustrating returns process or an opaque help desk doesn't just annoy a customer.
It fundamentally erodes trust because it violates that cultural expectation of ease.
So if we look at the strategic adaptations, what are brands doing? They're turning customers into co-creators.
Exactly. They're moving beyond broadcasting static messages and are actively inviting participation. This can be hyper-local, like a local skincare brand inviting customers to vote on the next new scent or flavor. It makes the customer feel invested.
And this co-creation moves into real-time digital environments, doesn't it?
Yes. Fan-driven communities on platforms like Line or Shopee Live are actively shaping product drops and marketing campaigns in real time. This not only strengthens customer advocacy, but it significantly reduces churn because the users have been integrated into a tribe where their opinions actually matter. The brand becomes a shared experience, not just a transaction.
We need some concrete examples of how major international companies are applying this strategy to capture that localized emotional vibe.
IKEA Thailand is a brilliant case study. They recognized that their loyalty card needed to be more than just a source of points. So instead of just offering the typical discounts, they ran seasonal family-themed workshops and organized temple fair-style events.
A temple fair-style event. That's a very specific, culturally resonant concept. What does that entail, and why is that so powerful?
Temple fairs are deeply nostalgic, traditional community events in Thailand. They're often linked to family gatherings and local culture. By running these events and maybe using the loyalty card as a passport to get in IKEA, embedded itself directly into family culture and nostalgia.
So the loyalty card transformed from just a discount mechanism into a passport to a cherished community experience.
That is exactly how the emotional connection multiplies CLTV.
What about Starbucks? They rely so heavily on global consistency, but how did they localize their vibe?
Starbucks Thailand hyper-localized through extreme customization. The Thai consumer values getting things just right, so offering free add-ons and a huge variety of customization options for their Gold members align perfectly with that cultural demand for individualized satisfaction. They also used hyper-local content in their line communications, showing they understood immediate community needs, not just global marketing trends.
And Sephora CA focused on tiered emotional engagement.
Right. They realized that engagement isn't just about how much money a person spends. They structured their loyalty tiers to reward activity that demonstrated emotional investment, posting product reviews, sharing photos, creating tutorials.
They rewarded the behavior of advocacy, not just the spending.
Precisely. That shift signaled that the brand values the customer's contribution to the community's vibe, not merely their wallet.
This commercial reliance on authenticity naturally drives this immense interest in the absolute smallest players in the influencing ecosystem. the nano-influencers.
Yes, nano-influencers, those with, say, 1,000 to 10,000 followers, are proving to be disproportionately valuable. They operate with extremely high closeness, sincerity, and credibility. Their power comes from their hyper-niche specialization.
Whether it's botanical skincare or vegan cooking or a specific local restaurant scene.
Exactly. And that attracts a highly interested and dedicated follower base.
So why are these smallest accounts considered more credible than the massive celebrity or macro influencers?
It's because they frequently start out as genuine, actual customers. Their content is based on real-life experiences, often unsolicited product reviews, which their niche followers see as sincere and reliable. They aren't perceived as conventional advertising vehicles.
That perception of sincerity lets them bypass the consumer's natural defense mechanisms.
And because they aren't overrated like their larger counterparts, brands can distribute their budgets across multiple nano-influencers, achieving really accurate target penetration and often a significantly higher return on investment.
That makes perfect sense. You trust a recommendation from a friend more than a famous spokesperson. But dealing with thousands of small influencers must be a massive management headache for a corporate marketing team.
It absolutely is a logistical challenge. Brands need to invest heavily in management tools, clear communication, performance analysis. There's a tangible risk of partnering with individuals who might lack professional experience, leading to late submissions, inconsistent content quality, or misunderstandings about brand guidelines.
But the benefits seem to outweigh the risks.
The benefits building genuine credibility and showing that the brand cares about the customer at the most granular, personal level are now essential in the modern marketplace.
The ultimate adaptation of the vibefluencer tactic, though, seems to be in these highly saturated markets like China and Singapore, where major corporations use it to navigate crippling consumer skepticism, what marketers call ad blindness.
This is the pinnacle of the commodification of intimacy. The strategy is to integrate the product so subtly that the brand doesn't even appear to be advertising explicitly. The influence is transmitted entirely through a shared lifestyle aesthetic.
Can you give us an example of how this works on the ground for a specific consumer?
Sure. Consider Lynn, a young professional in Shanghai. She's completely ad-blind to traditional high-budget commercials. Her loyalty is instead captured by a lifestyle curator, a vibefluencer, who specializes in these aesthetic vibe checks of daily life. This curator shares moments that are highly relatable to Lynn's own existence.
Moments like the demanding pace of life, the feeling of burnout.
Exactly. The influencer posts these aesthetic shots of a messy but stylishly arranged desk at 10 p.m., or the quiet moment of a morning coffee, or a reflective caption about the demanding 996 burnout culture that's so common in Chinese tech sectors. They're sharing a shared struggle and vulnerability.
And where is a product in this emotional narrative?
The product, say, a specific line of botanical skincare or a high-end ergonomic desk chair, is just tucked into the aesthetic background. Lynn doesn't see a sales pitch. She sees a beautiful, curated version of her own difficult life. She sees a shared struggle and a tiny, beautiful solution integrated into the influencer's aspirational, yet authentic life.
So this cultivates emotional brand loyalty through perceived intimacy, not through the authority or logic of a conventional ad campaign.
The corporation is essentially navigating the consumer's defensive filters by becoming the emotional mood that the consumer desperately wants to inhabit.
That is the core commercial realization. In an era of information saturation and deep skepticism, trust is no longer built through institutional authority. It's built through perceived shared vulnerability and intimacy, amplified by high-quality aesthetics and emotional resonance.
So when we pull all of this together, what we've covered today reveals that the rise of the vibefluencer is far more than just a passing trend.
It's a fundamental restructuring of how ideas, products, and political narratives achieve influence. It's a profound societal shift, and it seems to operate on two tracks.
On one hand, it does offer opportunities for grassroots civic engagement. It allows micro-influencers to dramatically boost voter turnout like we saw in Malaysia. It empowers the local, the authentic, and the niche.
But on the other hand, it poses these critical risks to democratic integrity and consumer autonomy. That's exemplified by the orchestrated disinformation networks in the Philippines and the commodification of private intimacy in commercial marketing.
This phenomenon is actively redefining the media hierarchy on a global scale. The power of traditional media institutions and formalized political discourse is declining because it's just too slow and too context-heavy for the modern digital metabolism.
And that vacuum is being filled by a digital ecosystem where platform-native content like homeless media in Indonesia and micro-influencers are leveraging these psychological mechanisms, parasocial bonds, narrative transportation, heuristic processing, to successfully bypass your rational filter and win influence instantaneously.
Whether we are discussing the complex multi-party Indonesian elections or the importance of Sabah and Sanuk in Thai brand loyalty, or the tactics used to combat ad blindness in Singapore and China, the underlying principle is consistent.
The audience has moved decisively from requiring detailed facts to demanding immediate, specific, and satisfying feelings.
In an environment defined by relentless cognitive overload and information fragmentation, resonance, that shared, synchronized emotional frequency, has become the ultimate currency.
Complex decision-making, whether it's choosing a leader or a skincare brand, has fundamentally transformed into a search for a matching vibrational frequency.
The result is this digitally fragmented world where audiences are intensely connected through shared emotion, yet they often operate within silos where their shared feelings are just constantly reinforced.
Yeah.
This new reality confirms that the need to resonate now fundamentally dictates how ideas are spread, consumed, and acted upon in politics and commerce globally.